Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I very much apologize for a slight delay of start this webinar. We had some technical issues, but we should be. My name is Peter Janoska, and I'm here joined by a number of other of my colleagues from the IEA. Today's webinar will focus on tracking clean energy progress, our just released most timely and comprehensive analysis of clean energy technologies. We will have about 25 minutes of presentation, which will be rather interactive, showing off the dynamic nature of the website, followed by a questions and answers from you. You may type your questions into the system. We will be collecting them and processing them as we go through, and we will turn to them after we finish with the presentation. Without any further ado, I'm going to pass on to my colleague Dave Turk, acting director for the Sustainable Technology and Outlook Directorate of the IEA, to give us an introduction to the TCEP and outline his new features. Dave, over to you.
No, thank you, Peter, and thanks for everyone joining us today. This will be a more dynamic web presentation than what we're used to. I'll have just a few slides that I'm going to go through, but then we're going to do the rest of the presentation navigating through our own website, our Tracking Clean Energy Progress website, and show you the results of our analysis, but also show you some of the features of this new interactive dynamic way to access our latest information and analysis. But before getting into the website itself, let me just give you a little bit of context that might be helpful, especially for some of you who are not familiar with this Tracking Clean Energy Progress effort. We've been doing this since 2011, basically looking at a variety of clean energy technologies and sectors, providing not only the latest numbers and latest trends for what's happening in all those technologies and sectors, but also benchmarking where those technologies, where those sectors are, off of where they need to be to achieve a 2-degree scenario. We've done this by a very simple stoplight formula of green, meaning that technology and sector is on track, it's doing its fair share to get to a 2-degree world. Yellow if it's making some progress but not nearly enough, and then red if it's not making much progress at all and really in need of a jump start along those lines. We've made several major enhancements in this year's version. First of all, we're no longer benchmarking off of just a 2-degree scenario. We're benchmarking off our sustainable development scenario, which not only is a well below 2 Paris compliance scenario, but it also incorporates air pollution reductions as well as energy access considerations, universal energy access by 2030 in line with the SDGs. Secondly, we're pushing the envelope here at the IEA with this product and everything that we do to make sure that you have the most timely information possible. So you'll see that most of the analysis, the recent numbers are 2017 numbers, sometime in estimate form, but again, providing you the very latest information, what's happening in these various technologies and sectors. Third, we're making a much bigger effort beyond this particular analysis, really at a cross-agency approach to these efforts. And we'll get into this in the website in terms of not only having our historic numbers, our projections, but also our forecasts as well, all in one place, investment analysis, innovation analysis, deployment, all in one place so that it's hopefully more user-friendly for all of you. And then fourth, and perhaps most revolutionary, is this is no longer a physical report. It is a dynamic, interactive website, which allows us to update it with information as we get new information and analysis along the way. So let me just give you a little bit of context before we go into the particular technology sectors. So first, let's just look at the overall emissions and energy-related CO2 emissions. As you see in the screen in front of you, the slide in front of you, we've seen a steady increase from 2000. The only time we saw a decrease was in 2009, in which we had a global economic recession. Otherwise, when GDP has gone up, our emissions have gone up. What we saw over the last 3 years, however, was a really hopeful sign that we're decoupling economic growth, which we have seen in pretty good amounts over the last 3 years, with the emissions. So you see in 2014, 2015, and 2016 a flattening of those emissions. Unfortunately, what we've seen in 2017 is actually, again, an increase. GDP rose and emissions rose, in this case by 1.4%. That is not good news for those of us, and I suspect everyone in this webinar wants our global emissions to peak and start going down. We're not there yet. There's a lot of challenges, and we'll get into some of the sectors in particular in which that increase is very, very directly relevant. Secondly, here's the central scenario. This is our WEO new policy scenario that basically looks at the status quo going forward. It does incorporate NDCs, nationally determined contributions, in the Paris context. So it's a scenario that has some ambition built into it, but you see the emissions continuing to increase into the future, into 2040. As I said, with this Tracking Clean Energy Progress effort, we're now benchmarking off what we call our sustainable development scenario. You see there in green, the sustainable development scenario. That's the path that we want to get on. The blue path is the path we're generally on in a status quo type scenario going forward. And here are the variety of wedges, if you will, policy measures, technology development measures under our modeling assumptions that require or that are needed to get us to that sustainable development scenario. When we say something is green or orange or red, on track, not on track, we're benchmarking off of what part that particular technology in that sector needs to do in order to reach that sustainable development scenario. Now, just one last slide. This shows a variety of well below 2 Paris compliant scenarios there in orange, going all the way to 2100. The sustainable development scenario you see there is the dotted line in black. This is just to show you that we're benchmarking off of a more ambitious, well below 2 scenario, the sustainable development scenario. And that has implications for what parts are green, what parts technologies are orange, and what technologies are red. So now we're going to stop the slides and switch over to the website. So we'll just navigate directly to the IEA.org website, and then we'll load up TCEP just like you, of course, could do once this webinar is done when you want to access the very latest information. So you should see in front of you now the IEA website. At the very front part of the landing page for our website is the Tracking Clean Energy Progress. I'm going to click that to get into the landing page for the TCEP. Now here are the 38 technologies and sectors. This just went live a few weeks ago. You see them broken up into categories. This is the first time we've actually tried to organize our technologies and sectors under TCEP. You see the power sector with renewables, nuclear, natural gas, etc. Buildings and the related technology sectors there. Transport, industry, energy integration, which is a new catch-all category, trying to incorporate some of the cross-cutting technologies that are important in the energy transition going forward. Now, because this is a dynamic website, it allows you to do things like to show across the different sectors which technologies are on track. The bottom line here is not good. We've only got 4 of 38 technologies that are on track: solar PV, lighting, data centers and networks, and then electric vehicles. A number more, the largest category are those in orange or yellow, that middle category. And then way too many technologies, and we'll get into some of these in particular detail, are red. That is not on track, making much progress at all. What I'm going to do now, before turning over to my colleagues to drill down further on renewable power and then into some of the other sectors, buildings, transport, industry, and energy integration, is just show you a few of the dynamic features of having this on the web. And hopefully this will be useful as you navigate this website going forward, looking for the latest information and analysis from the IEA. What we've done for each of these sectors and then subsectors and technologies is include the key number we think everyone should look to first and foremost when judging whether a sector is on track or not. For the overall power sector, that's the 2.6% increase that we saw in 2017 for emissions. Now that's a 2.6 increase after falling for 3 years. So that is notable in itself. It's a big reason why the whole sector, the whole power sector, is actually red in 2017. And to be on track, then we need to have a 4% decrease. So we're going up at an increase rate of 2.6%, and we actually need to decrease 4% to 2030 in order to be on track to the SDS target. So we have the key number in a few short sentences, and then we also get into what is the key chart? What is the single key chart that shows this in graphical terms? So here you see the flattening of those historic emissions over the last 3 years. You see the increase in 2017, and then you see the scale of the slope downward that we need to get on total. Because it's a dynamic website, you can look at just the total, or if you want to compare gas and coal to each other or against the total, it allows you to do that in a more seamless kind of way. As you'll see throughout the presentations, we have a lot of geographic breakdowns. Instead of just giving the global numbers, we're giving regional numbers and country-specific numbers as well. And so as you see on the screen in front of you, if you want to compare where the world is on carbon intensity for electricity generation, you can do that compared to China, and then bring in India, US, Southeast Asia, European Union. If you want to just compare India and China, you can take all the others away. And we hope this is a very useful feature to allow you to get the kind of information that you want to get as quickly as you possibly can going forward. You'll also see here, and you can try this out later, a download chart as a variety of different formats. So you can actually, let's say you just want to have India versus the world, you put those two up and you can create your own chart that you use in your presentations or your PowerPoints to your ministers or CEOs. And you'll see this feature with all of the charts on this website in front of you. So these are some of the cross-cutting indicators just to go through on power. My colleague Jaime will get into the renewable power section, but you see the other sectors in here as well. Just to show off one additional feature here, if you look at the solar PV drill down, it provides a number of pieces of information, historic numbers again, but also forecast numbers and SDS targets. We've never before put all of these numbers that we keep track of very closely in one place. So in this instance, you can see solar PV generation being on target. Here's the geographic breakdown in a slightly different format if you want to just see what the 2017 numbers are versus 2016 and 2015 numbers along those lines. We've also included, and my colleague Simon will get into some of the innovation features of it. Under each of the technologies, we look into specific innovation gaps by particular technology, by particular subsector. So all in all, we hope that this more dynamic presentation, this dynamic format of the TCEP is very useful as an ongoing tool for you to find the information and analysis you need. And we will be updating all of this information you see right here and on all of the different web pages for TCEP when they were last updated. So as we get new numbers, as we as we undertake new analysis, we'll make sure and update that on a regular basis. So anytime you come here, you'll be assured to get the latest numbers and latest information from our experts here at IEA. So let me pass it over. We're going to go through, as Peter said, a variety of the particular findings in TCEP for this year. And I'll turn it over to my colleague Jaime, who will go through the renewables part of the analysis. Over to you, Jaime.
Thank you very much, Dave. So in terms of one important methodological information, we are tracking renewable power both in terms of the generation and capacity. Capacity, I mean power plants that will be built, and then TCEP, as my colleagues mentioned, combines the historical data that IEA has with the forecast that we published in Renewables 2017 last October with few adjustments, and then comparing them with certain indicators to SDS targets. So overall, we basically track renewable power by looking at each technology and each region, and then our assessment is that renewable power needs more effort, so it's not currently on track towards its 2DS targets. In 2017, share of renewable in the power capacity was about 25%. However, this needs to accelerate much faster than the current rates to about 46% in 2030. And this is a big jump compared to what we have seen over the last few years. If you look at the solar PV, just clicking into the section, maybe start with the good news. Solar PV is the only technology which is on track to reach the SDS target that we have. As you can see here, we see an exponential growth, and in our forecast, this trend continues in solar PV. These numbers, as you can see, is up to 2022. It's related to our last year's forecast. We will update this when we have the new forecast numbers and try to understand. The reason why solar PV is on track and its status has not been changed compared to last year was that there was a big important jump in Chinese capacity additions, which is about 53 gigawatts in 2017. Although you can see in this picture that not all the countries are growing very fast, but Chinese growth is making up for all the decline that you see right now from in the United States, in the European Union, Japan, and also India contributes with the jump. You may ask, with the recent information that we have related to China's new policy 10 days ago, we are still working on it, and then we will update the numbers in the near future. There are two important other technologies that define whether renewables are on track or not. The one which is onshore, which is this year changed from on track to needs improvement or more efforts needed. The reason why that we observed that capacity additions of onshore winds globally declined second year in a row since 2015. This is mainly due to China. As you can see here, there was a significant drop since 2015, and there is no region right now to make up for this loss of capacity additions. That's why with this continuous drop and several other expectations in other countries that will not make up for this decline in capacity additions, we downgraded onshore wind from on track to needs improvement this year. Another important technology that we need to highlight very quickly is hydropower. As you know, historically, at least in 2017, we estimated that around 66% of generation of renewables are still coming from hydropower. So it's a significant source, and its capacity additions over the last 3 years has been declining. This is due to the trends in several regions, including China and Brazil. But overall, as you can see, there's an important increase in generation since 2000. Are getting lower and lower into the global system. And that's why hydropower is currently not on track and needs more efforts. We may change this if we see additional projects that are financed in the short term that can come in a shorter period. But hydropower overall is challenged by increasing social acceptance issues and environmental assessment issues in many countries, and the costs have been increasing according to them. And after this, I would like to pass it on to Cecilia to continue the presentation.
Thank you very much, Jaime. So what I'd like to do now is take you through some of the highlights for the building, transport, and industry sectors. So first off, with buildings, what you can see here is that we have expanded our coverage in the TCEP of how many building technologies that we're covering. Previously, we had only 2 categories, which were building envelopes and lighting appliances and other equipment. In this year's tracking, we have expanded that to 6 categories by splitting out in more detail some of the relevant categories to really highlight and take a deeper dive into what's happening in the building sector. Unfortunately, as with power, it is a sector which is not on track. in terms of meeting its contribution to the SDS targets. One positive sign is, though, that we have seen emissions related to the building sector has clearly peaked in 2013, but unfortunately this year, from an energy consumption perspective, we saw another increase in buildings energy use this last year. We have done some very interesting work really to try to highlight some blind spots in the energy system. And I'd like to just say a few words on the future of cooling, where we actually see a need to pay more attention to what happens in terms of energy use for cooling in the building sector, as this is clearly the fastest growing end use in the building sector, with sales rising 3 times faster than efficiency improvements. And we see that every second, somewhere in the world, 10 air conditioners will be sold over the next 30 years, really highlighting the need to prioritize actions on policy to realize efficiency potentials and improve the performance and energy intensity of cooling equipment if we are going to keep energy use in buildings under control. This technology area, we've seen some improvements in terms of expansion of policies, but this is an area where definitely more efforts are needed. A positive spot in terms of buildings is lighting, where I think this is an excellent example of how we can see a very fast rollout of adoption of new technologies, very rapid cost declines as well. And you can see here that in a matter of only just a few years, we have seen an incredible switch from a market which was dominated by incandescent light bulbs, where you see a very fast rollout of LEDs. This needs to be maintained, and as you can see here in this graph, we will need to see LEDs really becoming the primary source of lighting if we are going to hit the SDS objectives. And just to also highlight that in terms of the building categories that we are looking at, we also have, in addition to splitting out the technology categories into more detail, we have a new category that we're looking at of data centers and networks, recognizing the importance that digitalization will be playing in the energy sector. We are also looking at the role of energy use coming out of data centers. Now, I'd like to I'd now like to go over and highlight some of our work on the transport sector. Thank you very much. And here, this is a sector where we've seen some good news, particularly with respect to electric vehicles, but overall, we need to see more efforts across the transport sector. In transport, we cover 7 technology areas, covering a mix of road, shipping, as well as aviation and rail, so a very broad spectrum of modes. But as we see, it's really the road categories that account for the largest contributions in terms of emissions and energy use. And our work on electric vehicles is really a bright spot in the transport sector, with the only technology area in transport that is on track, and one of the few across the 38 that we're looking at that are on track. In 2017, we saw that the sale of electric cars surpassed the 1 million mark for the first time, with a total global stock over 3 million vehicles. But although this is encouraging with a very rapid growth rate, if you look at this figure here, we need to see an exponential increase in that adoption of electric vehicles if we're going to meet the SDS trajectories. And for those of you who are interested in more details on electric vehicles, we've recently released the latest edition of our Global Electric Vehicle Outlook, with a very comprehensive look at the state of electric vehicles, including details on the charging infrastructure and policies around the world to really help accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles globally. And then I also wanted to highlight in transport that one significant change that has come is an upgrading of shipping, where we previously had it being not on track. But in April of this year, the IMO agreed to a very ambitious target of having shipping-related emissions by 2050 compared to 2008. And this has led us to upgrade that technology area to needs further improvements from not being on track. Because with this industry target, we see that they'll need to implement a very drastic shift in how energy is going to be used in the shipping sector. And we think that this commitment will catalyze a lot of innovation in the shipping sector and in energy to allow us to achieve that very ambitious IMO target, which will lead to emissions really being drastically reduced out into the longer term. And then just to end, to highlight that we do have, as Dave mentioned, this broad energy integration category, where we are looking at 6 technology areas, many of which we have covered in past TSEPs, including storage, smart grids, and hydrogen and renewable heat. 2 new areas for integration in terms of technology areas that we're covering and unique features for this edition of TSEP is really tracking digitalization. As I mentioned, we've recently, late last year, released a report on the role of digitalization and the impact it'll have on the energy sector. And we are also beginning to track more closely those technologies, which will have a big play in driving that sector, as well as doing much more analysis to track activities and progress on demand response, all of which are going to be very key, together with these other technology areas here, in allowing us to have a more rapid rollout of renewable energy technologies, but also a better integration of the entire energy system across the supply and end-use sectors. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it on to my colleague, Araceli.
Thanks, Cecilia. Good afternoon, everyone. So I'll just give you an overview of basically the content that we have on the TSEP portal for the industrial sector. This page basically presents the overall data and information related to the whole industrial sector, which covers very different subsectors. The first point to highlight after some of those high-level indicators presented initially, which are more related to either direct CO2 emissions or total final industrial energy consumption at the aggregated level, is that when we looked at, for instance, the industrial productivity by region, which is defined as the total industrial energy consumption per unit of value added being generated, we can really see that there's been improvement in different regions over the past. You can see, as Dave mentioned, you can play with the graph and activate different regions. But of course, if we are to meet those SDS scenario targets, this level of acceleration or of growth would be needed to accelerate. And the changes that we've seen in the past as progress by industry is mainly related to energy efficiency improvements because of an adoption of greater share of state-of-the-art technologies, process integration, best practices, but also there's been an effect of structural changes occurring within the overall industrial sector with a move towards less energy-intensive sectors that has had, let's say, a positive impact in this type of indicator. Of course, talking about energy efficiency, in the future that we have in the portal now, we are tracking the coverage of mandatory policies that could be driven energy efficiency targets across different countries and regions, targets and standards as well. And here we can see that in most regions, that level of coverage as the total industrial energy use, it's below or around 20% as a share. So indeed, a lot of room for, let's say, improving or expanding that type of coverage. But even going beyond that, of course, energy efficiency is one component. I mean, policy and regulations we'll need to look into other areas as well as technological shifts, innovation developments that could help to mitigate or to overcome some of the challenges of the industry to, for instance, integrate more renewables or to overcome the challenge of process-related CO2 emissions. So if you explore more down the industry portal, what you find once you navigate through some of these aggregated industry indicators is that there is a section where the portal provides information or a high-level update on where the key energy-intensive subsectors on the industrial side are at the moment. So there is a specific section for each of them, covering cement, aluminum, and chemicals, and pulp and paper. And again, you can either through this through this portal or through the landing page, you can directly navigate through these individual subsector challenges. These pages, for instance, if we just go to the cement one as an example, give an overview again of the specific indicators of how that specific subsector, even if there's been some improvements over the past in terms of historical progress. One of the features as well, beyond the discussion of each of these subsectors, is that towards the end of the sections, there is also an identification of gaps from an innovation perspective. After the discussion, open these drop-down menus where you can navigate through the different key innovation gaps that we have identified that will be required for these different subsectors to get on track with the SDS type of trajectory. And if you, for instance, go into any of those possibilities, there is information around, how, so first of all, why this challenge is that critical, and what could be some of the focus areas for an R&D and demonstration perspective in the next 5 years, as well as involve stakeholders as well. The other piece I just wanted to mention when you navigate through this is that we also try to use this portal to link related analysis that is being also undertaken by the IEA. In this case, for instance, through the cement piece, you can directly go to the recently launched technology roadmap if you want to go into more details of what is behind really that transition, not just even by 2030, but also more in the long term and how these both work together. Just the last component I wanted to highlight on the industry side, as you see with this structure here, is that within this, let's say, identification of specific technological challenges, there is certain, let's say, cross-cutting technologies for which there's been a dedicated piece being developed. And this is the case, for instance, for carbon capture and storage and use, which has a specific, let's say, page in the portal. And here again, very similar structure, so you can navigate through some of the information that is provided through the several indicators. But just to finish with one, the indicator about monitoring what has been the deployment of large-scale CO2 capture projects around the world in the industrial sector, but also in fuels transformation, which is also included in this section. And here you can see from 2000 onwards that globally we are reaching about a level close to, 28 if we look at just industrial projects in terms of megatons of CO2 being captured annually at the moment. Of course, this also shows what the projects in the pipeline could be is in a, let's say, maximum capacity perspective. But the key message is that if you play a little bit with the graph and you include the SDS target, then is when we see that let's say, progress is really very little compared to the acceleration that would be required if we are to meet those type of, trajectories that are in line with the SDS scenario. So yeah, I think with that, just give you an overview so you can explore all these different subsectors. Of course, as David's been mentioning, the idea is to expand the content on the web. So as long as we got more industry-related analysis, that would be linked directly or indirectly through the portal, so you can get access into that. And with that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague Simon Bennett, which is going to talk about R&D spending.
Great, thanks, Araceli. Let's head back to the main page, and what we're talking about in this final section as we go through the different parts of TCEP 2018 is technology innovation. Now, what we've seen as we've been through many of the other technologies, and what you'll observe if you navigate around the site after this webinar, is that there's a tremendous amount of technology progress ongoing, and the energy sector is a sector that's defined by technology progress and competition between different fuels. And even with the progress that we've seen so far, when we look forward and we look at these scenarios and the policy objectives that are being set around the world, there is a terrific need for more improvements in terms of both cost reductions, but also performance improvements of individual technologies. And that applies not only to the technologies that we've highlighted as being not on track, but also to the ones that are on track. And besides policy that will help the deployment of those technologies, better technologies that will improve their competitiveness in the energy system and help them expand into different countries, different sectors, different applications is going to be crucial. But this is not an easy thing to track in terms of the data. So what we've been trying to do over the last couple of years is bring together a sort of a clean energy innovation tracking framework at the IEA. And it has a number of different elements, which I'll be able to go through. As we scroll down here, we'll find that there is a chart that highlights public spending on energy R&D, and we can go to a bit more information on this separate innovation page. Now, public spending on energy RD&D, which is research, demonstration, development and demonstration, is pretty critical, we think, as a component of progressing technology, because governments often do the early stage research of developing new technologies from basic research to the lab, and then helping that to get into private hands for further development. And there's good news in 2017, which is that the tracking that we've done of spending by governments around the world suggests that there was a 13% increase year on year in 2017 in the spending on RD&D by governments. And one of the factors that's boosted that is actually spending in North America, especially the United States, where we think that spending will have been around 7.8 billion last year on low carbon technologies. And that's come after a number of years of relative decline. And we're hopeful that initiatives such as Mission Innovation, where governments are coming together to agree to double their spending on low carbon energy R&D, are helping to encourage increases that will continue beyond 2017. But that's not the only place where we have data. We've also been looking at data for the reported R&D spending of listed companies around the world. And there we also see an increase. It's an increase of around 4% year on year. Now, obviously, it's difficult to estimate exactly what's going on in companies around the world. R&D is often a proprietary piece of information in spending budgets. But you can go on the TCEP website to an area where we've put more information about the methodology. But it's interesting to note that there is a large amount of spending, we think, on clean energy technologies coming from companies in the automotive sector. And that's also something that's reflected in the tracking that we're doing of venture capital deals. Now, this is a much lower level of innovation spending, but increasingly companies are moving towards acquiring new technologies through things like corporate venture capital. And as the industry has recovered in the VC industry from the clean tech bust around 2011, we're seeing some of the highest recorded spending on clean energy technologies in 2016 and 2017. And again, the transport sector is very present there, with startups in automated vehicles, startups in electric vehicles, especially taking a large number of those deals. Now, just to what we've developed, this is something that Araceli was just indicating, is a slightly more comprehensive tracking framework that can't be shown in charts. It doesn't have specific data points around it, but it is a very, very comprehensive look at around 100 different innovations IEA is highlighting across the 35 key technologies and sectors. And that draws on expertise within the IEA, from the teams here that develop the roadmaps for different technologies, but also the IEA Energy Technology Network, which has around 6,000 different scientists and engineers engaged in it from around the world. So this is just a quick look at how many different sectors we have where you can look for innovation gaps and find out much more information. If I open up the one on steel here, you'll see that there's a section on new smelting reduction processes. Top gas recovery for blast furnaces is a technology where we see promising potential developments. The same with coke oven gas reforming, direct reduction based on natural gas. And if you click on some of the key initiatives in these sections, what you'll see is really a year-on-year indication of where we're seeing progress, where new projects are coming online, where are there pilot projects, demonstration projects, and policies. And that's something that we'll be updating in this space as the months go by, as the years tick over, and we're hoping to be able to report really interesting progress in terms of very, very specific project development. So we think that's a great resource that all of you out there will be able to find something that you're interested in the sectors in which you work. So that was a quick look through what we're doing on tracking clean energy innovation progress. And I think that all of the sectors that we've just been talking about will be updated as we move forward, not only on an annual basis anymore, but because of this web platform approach, as things like the World Energy Investment Report gets published in the middle of July, we'll be updating what we're tracking in terms of the share of energy investment that's going to clean energy in particular. And now, I've come to the end of my section, and I'm going to hand this back to Dave or Peter, who will draw some conclusions.
Thank you very much, Simon and everyone, and thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your attention. We have received a couple of questions, so as I promised, we have a few minutes left, so we're gonna turn to the questions, and I'm gonna then pass on to my colleague Dave Turk to close and leave us with a few thoughts for the next steps for TCEP. One of the questions here on the renewable heat, I'll pass on to Cecilia.
Sure. The question is, why is renewable heat grouped all together and under system integration, whereas renewable power has technology-specific subdivisions? Why not look at specific technologies in renewable heat? And for us, we basically will continue to expand our technology coverage. It is rather data and time intensive to cover every single individual technology, and we have some limitations in terms of the data that we can find. In terms of renewable heat, in the past we have reported separately on solar thermal technologies, and we can look towards expanding that coverage as we are able to collect more data and more information. But it is a very good suggestion that we try to continue this expansion of different technology areas. And my colleague Araceli would also like to complement.
Thanks, Celia. Yeah, just to complement that, I think just for the audience, there's some overlaps in some areas. So if you're interested in renewable heat, for instance, if you navigate through some of the subsectors within the industrial page, then there are some applications for heat generation that are basically using renewable sources. So I think in a way we've tried also by having a specific dedicated renewable heat section in the systems integration chapter, then in a way we are providing it a bit more visibility at the cross-cutting level, because it's an area that's, it's important per se. But if you are interested in more specific applications through the industrial web page, you would also find information there on the industrial side.
Terrific. Well, we have another question with a nice compliment at the front end, so I'll read the compliment first, and then we'll answer the question, and much appreciated on that. The portal and your presentation are much appreciated. There is an exclamation point as well, so I'll point that out. Will it be possible to navigate the analysis by region/country? That would be very important. So I think as you've seen through the course of the presentation, we do have some disaggregation by country and some by region. You'll see that as I just point out the power sector in particular. If you look on your screen, this is an example of that kind of disaggregation. Frankly, we've always had more data and more granularity to our data than we've been able to publish in print form. And so this new web interface, frankly, allows us an opportunity to get more disaggregated by country, by geography, and especially with the kind of feedback like this, we'll look to do even more of that. Frankly, the goal of this particular project and just about everything we do at the IEA is provide information and analysis so that decision makers out there can take that and make better decisions, can have real world impact. So certainly having information that's granular by country, by geography, we've heard from several folks, is important. And we'll be looking to do that more and more over time. This TCEP is very much a work in progress and looking to further improve it, further make it efficient for the user and provide the kind of information you all are asking for. So there's another question we've got here, looking at the big picture. What has to happen to change the fundamentals away from growth and fossil fuel use? All efforts so far have ended with CO2 actually going up. Thanks for the question. Not a very optimistic frame to that question, but I think appropriately sobering for where we're at. As we showed on the very front end, we did see an increase in emissions of 1.4% from the energy side. That's not encouraging. We've not peaked. We're not going down. And you certainly see our analysis with our sustainable development scenario about how quickly we need to go down in the rate of decrease. One indicator here, of course, is 4 out of the 38 technologies are green. That's not a very large number at all. The other thing we've done here, we didn't have a specific presentation on this, but let me just show it to you very quickly, is if you scroll down the main landing page for TCEP, you get down to a section of, is the energy system on track? And what we've tried to do is look at a variety of high-level indicators across the energy system that would be useful to have a gauge of where we're at as an overall. So here you see the overall CO2 numbers. That's an important indicator of currently flat for many, many years, where they need to be going into the future. Share of electricity in total final energy consumption, annual change in energy intensity. You see where we need to go here, this SDS target of negative 3.4%, but we've been around anywhere from 1% to 2% in our best year, but not approaching the 3.4%. So there's a variety of these higher level indicators which will give you a higher level picture overall of how we're doing. But the short answer is we're not doing great. There needs to be a lot of action. And one of the things the TCEP tries to show is we need to not just have action with solar PV and electric vehicles, but we need a range of technology solutions across sectors, industry, other parts of transport, et cetera, to really make.
Sure. There's also a question about hydrogen. It says, what about hydrogen, which people are increasingly talking about, including some reports from the IEA. We last year had a very interesting report on highlighting some of the potentials for hydrogen in the industry sector through the use of renewables. And over the course of the next 2 years, we will be doing some additional analysis across our different sectors at the potential of hydrogen playing a bigger role in the energy system. So yes, we are going to be looking in more detail on that. There is a brief page on hydrogen in the tracking analysis. For the moment, there isn't a great deal of detail on this, but under energy integration, we do have some details on hydrogen and some information in terms of its current deployment in a variety of areas. And we will continue to gather more information on this and provide more details in this area.
So this is Simon. I'm just jumping in to say that it's a very welcome question because it allows us to highlight the fact that as topics like hydrogen become more relevant and more interesting to people, we're actually developing our work and adding these to the Tracking Clean Energy Progress framework. So one of the things that we have been doing recently is looking at the deployment of electrolyzers and fueling stations for hydrogen. There's some analysis on that which will be coming out in our forthcoming World Energy Investment Report, and we'll be populating the TCEP pages with that once we have that work.
Terrific. Well, I think we're running out of time and certainly want to keep everyone to their schedules. Maybe to answer a few questions, see if my colleagues have any others. We've been getting a whole load of questions and appreciate that. And then I'll say some concluding remarks. So just to answer a few questions in one, Thanks, extremely useful tool. Can I share it somehow? So this is all free information, publicly accessible. Everyone who has a web connection can find this. You can even use your smartphone and get the analysis that way. And so certainly the link is there. It's available. We'll always have it updated. So we wanted to make this very accessible and efficient to everyone. And so far, we track our numbers, of course, of web hits. And so far, we've been very encouraged that this digital platform is an incredibly useful one. So on launch day for TCEP this year, we had 3 times the number of web hits as we did for last year in terms of downloading the PDF of the report. And the numbers have remained quite strong on that front. We've got a question from a reporter, actually more a comment. Thanks, extremely useful for journalists. We certainly hope so. And one hope we have is because anytime you go here, you'll be assured of getting the very latest information and numbers that we've got. Analysis that we have is you can always find the very latest information on solar PV or CCS in industry or hydrogen on the website. And so instead of having to dig through PDFs or reports that you may or may not know are timely or not, you can just go to the website and have that. So we hope that this is useful for journalists among others. We've got a question on the scenarios. Are the scenario indicators a combination of ETP and WEO model outputs or one or the other? This year we based our are we on track or not off of our WEO sustainable development scenario. But one thing we're doing here at the IEA is to make sure, for those who are IEA watchers or followers, to make sure our WEO analytical tools are very much matched up with and working with our ETP, our Energy Technology Perspectives tool. So the analysis you see here before you is coming from both our WEO team and our ETP team, and frankly throughout the agency, throughout the IEA, the range of analysts. So this is a cross-IEA effort trying to put all the latest information and analysis in front of you in the most useful way possible. So I think we're running out of time, but let me see if any of my other colleagues have any other questions that you want to answer going forward. Okay, not seeing any. Let me just conclude very briefly. Again, thanking everyone for their time today. Secondly, pointing out that this is very much a work in progress. And so any other thoughts that you've got of ways to improve this kind of tool to make it even more user-friendly and efficient, like the comment about making even more geographic breakdowns, please continue to feed that into us here at the IEA. We do what we do. We're getting paid for it, but I think mostly we do what we do to try to have real-world impact and try to provide this information and analysis in the most user-friendly way possible. So we genuinely want to improve these kinds of tools like this digital first TCEP so that score again, this will be continually updated throughout the year. The website will always be as timely as it possibly can be. And we will send out tweets and other notifications when we have some good new analysis on renewables or innovation or industry or electric vehicles. We've already updated parts of this website, even though it just went live. We had our big global electric vehicle outlook, our GEVO, come online. And so all the latest GEVO numbers are now online and part of this on tracking clean energy progress. So the third point is just the timely nature of this as well. So with that, again, thanks for your time, and certainly look forward to doing what we can from the IEA end with the TCEP, but more generally to be as helpful as we can to all of you out there. But thanks for the time and attention.